Hello, so today we'll be talking about Robert Herrick. A little bit about Robert Herrick. He was baptized on August 24th, 1591. He was born in London. He was the seventh child in his family. His father died 14 months after he was born, and he apprenticed for his uncle. And then he went to college at St. John's College in Cambridge. He was an unknown poet throughout his life. He was never married, and he was also took holy orders in 1623. Some of Robert Herrick's works is the Hesperides, or the works both humane and divine. It was a collection of all of his works. And then a couple other ones are To the Virgins, To Make Much of Time, Upon Julia's Clothes, Corinna's Going a-Maying, and then what we will be talking about today, my favorite poem, Delight and Disorder. Delight and Disorder by Robert Herrick. A sweet disorder in the dress kindles and clothes a wantonness. A lawn about the shoulders thrown into a fine distraction. An erring lace which here and there enthralls the crimson stomach air. A cuff neglectful and thereby ribbons to flow confusedly. A winning wave deserving note in the tempestuous petticoat. A careless shoestring in whose tie I see a wild civility. Do more bewitch me than when art is too precise in every part. Before we talk about my interpretations of the poem, I would like to go over some words and give the definitions for them. Wantonness, sexually lawless or unrestrained, loose, lewd, a wanton or lascivious person, especially a woman. Enthrall means to captivate or charm. Stomacher, a richly garment covering the stomach and chest worn by a woman. Tempestuous, to disturb violently. Civility, a polite action or expression. And bewitch means to enchant, charm, fascinate. So my interpretations of Delight and Disorder, it goes into great detail about the beauty and imperfections in a person. This poem talks about a woman who is wearing clothes that are shabby or not worn correctly, but he is still fascinated by her beauty. He catches his eye on her just by the way what she's wearing, but likes what he sees. And he shows an example when he says, a cuff neglectful and thereby, or when he says, a careless shoestring in whose tie. So, for example, got my assistant, I dressed up for it, where you have the cuff neglectful, other one here, and then little tucked in jorts. I mean, you can use this poem to tell people, I mean, I might look disorderly, but I am a delight. So then, thank you. I would use this poem if I was not wearing good clothes, just to prove that I'm a good person. So then next, the speaker notices every problem with the outfit, but his attention is grabbed at every detail. So like I showed before, there's something fascinating with something that's imperfect, and it catches his eye and makes him want to know a little bit more about the other person. And then at the end of the poem, you see that the speaker likes tiny imperfections when Herrick writes, do more bewitch me than when art is too precise in every part. So with that, it begs the question, how can you like art that is not perfect, if that makes any sense? So it's a very interesting line, because when you think of art, you think of a beautiful landscape, you think of beautiful sculptures, but it makes sense in the fact that he doesn't like the perfect views of art, because it's not real, and it's more of like an act, if anything like that. And then next, we'll be talking about the oxymorons. So an oxymoron is something that contradicts the statements. So something like, for an example that's not in the poem, I would say seriously funny, because a funny joke, it's supposed to be a joke, it's not supposed to be serious, but you'll say seriously funny. I mean, it's an oxymoron. So the first oxymoron is Delight and Disorder, the title of the poem. There's no when you think of a disorder, it's usually not a delight. you usually think of it as something that doesn't help, something that's not great. And then a sweet disorder in the dress from line 1, that is also an oxymoron because it's the same thing. A sweet disorder, it's not sweet. If anything, it's kind of, not good. And then into a fine distraction from line 4. So when you think of a distraction, they're not good. You want to stay away from distractions and you want to keep focus. But a fine distraction contradicts itself and it gets you thinking about what would be a good distraction. In this case, in the poem, it'd be this woman behind all the clothes, where she's just beautiful for coming out in all the imperfections. And then the next one is in the tempestuous petticoat. Tempestuous is a violent, moving type of storm. And then petticoat is a nice, soft underlayer of the dress that woman would wear. So you think of that is contradictory of this of itself because it is soft and not moving too much, when tempestuous is very violent. And then the last one I saw was I see a wild civility, where from before, civility is a polite action or expression. But when you think of wild, you think of an action that is out of the ordinary, violent, crazy, not polite or any of the sorts. Next, this is my most favorite part of the poem. It's the most in-depth, interesting part that not a lot of people have seen, and it's the rhyme scheme. So the rhyme scheme is not quite there, as you can tell. From earlier, when you listened to me read the poem, I said, "Along about the shoulders thrown, into a fine distraction," where everyone knows that means distraction. But I said distraction to make the poem flow a little bit better. And I feel like that's what he was meaning by that. And so he does this because, going back to the title, is that there's a lot more delight, there's a lot more disorder in the whole entire poem. So like he's rhyming thereby and tie. It's pretty close, but it's not perfectly close how we usually get to see, or confusedly in civility. It's close, but it's not quite there. But that's what makes this poem so interesting, in the fact that it's disorderly, but also you find a delight in it with how well it moves throughout. Next, I'm going to be talking about one of his poems, Upon Julia's Clothes, and comparing it to Delight and Disorder, showing the similarities between the two. They're very similar because of the fact that he's talking about a beautiful woman and the clothing that they're wearing. Herrick writes about beauty and how women are able to enchant him. So that's very interesting because he, like I said earlier, took on holy orders, and it begs the question, like, why would he join a clergy, a church, if he won't be able to get with women and stay away from them if he's talking with it? To wrap it all up, unfortunately, Robert Herrick was overlooked during his time. However, over the years, we've finally come to learn that he was actually a genius in the way he set up his poems, and there's a lot more than just the poem. There's a deeper meaning between them. And he is now known as a very prized poet, and I'm very happy that we were able to get his poems, even though he was not famous for them, back in his life.